Hi, I'm Cindy Chopert, and this is Creating Accessible Documents. Module 1 is the overview. So the overview, the modules that we'll be going through in this course are the first one today is the overview. The second one will be Word, Microsoft Word, then PowerPoint, and then 2 modules on PDFs, part 1 and part 2, because PDFs can be a little tricky and take some time to learn. You'll find that there are similarities in the approaches you take for all of those different um, platforms. So as we go through this, we'll be repeating the same thing over and over, and you'll get a really good understanding of it. This course will be delivered in person and online, and for some people, it'll be recorded rather than in person, but it's the same concept, same course. There'll also be a Canvas course, which you should have gotten an invitation to, and that will be where you do assignments, discussions, quizzes, and when you complete each module of this course, you'll earn a badge or a micro-credential, which you'll be able to accumulate. And when you've done the whole course, you'll get this last one, which is the Creating Accessible Documents badge. That's the coveted one. So once you get everything done, you'll get that badge. So I want to start off by looking at some examples of accessibility done poorly. So here we go. If you look at these, you'll see this first one that somebody made the effort to build a ramp, and it's marked and labeled and ready to go, except that nobody took care of the median in the middle. So it doesn't do any good to be able to go down this or up this because you can't get past the middle of the street. On this one, again, somebody worked really hard. They painted all these lines. They marked it blue. They gave a little side thingy for the door and getting your wheelchair out, but there's no curb cut out to get up to the sidewalk. But this one's just sad. Obviously, this pole has been here a really long time. Somebody pointed out maybe that's parking for the wheelchair, but it's certainly not parking for a person in a wheelchair. They even have a ramp to go up. You just can't get to the parking spot. One of my personal favorites, wheelchair ramp available, please ask at counter. Now, how you're supposed to get in there to ask if you're in a wheelchair, I don't know. This one, if you'll notice, goes up to, one step short. So you get up here and you can't go up any further. And all of these things obviously have been built for a while. People worked on them, just didn't quite get it. This one I think is pretty obvious how you would get in the door, as anybody's guess. Another favorite of mine, keep clear for wheelchair users. So if you're a wheelchair user, I don't know what you're supposed to do to get up the second part because the sign is in the middle of it. And the old flower pot. And then this one is for the very strong or the people who like to go really fast because the pitch of this is so steep that either you can't go up it or going down it would be hazardous to your health. So all of these are examples of somebody trying to do accessibility and doing it poorly. But doing it poorly is almost worse than not doing it at all. It doesn't help the person, and it really says, I don't really care, I'm just trying to do this to meet a requirement. I don't think any of these were done with malice. I think that people just didn't know what they were doing, but it's up to you, if you're going to be the one putting in accessible things, to learn how to do it correctly. Now, there are some laws that have to do with accessibility. Some of them are fairly old, so they don't deal directly with accessible documents and digital accessibility, but the concepts are able to apply across. So the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination by the reason of disability, and you can't exclude them from participation in or be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And the program or activity defined, you'll see that in 2B, local education agencies are called out specifically. So if you work for a local education agency of any sort, you may not discriminate based on disability. The Washington state has their own policy, and this one actually does deal with digital access. says people with disabilities have access to and use of information and data and be provided access to the same services and content that is available to persons without disabilities. There's a little unless, it's just not possible, but try to ignore that and make everything that you do accessible for everyone. The ADA, which is sort of the act that everybody has referred to for many years here, prohibits discrimination and guarantees that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else. Now, this has been challenged at different times because it doesn't mention digital disability or digital access, sorry. But if you look here, and I'll come back to that, Domino's, I just found this in yesterday's mail or on Twitter. Domino's was sued because their website was not accessible. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that that was discrimination based on ADA, that covers websites and mobile applications, and it can stay in court. So they're still working on this case, but they're saying that you can't discriminate by having an inaccessible website. I'm going to go back one slide here. The definition of disability is fairly important. So it's a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. A person has a history of or record of such an impairment, or a person is perceived by others as having such an impairment. So the ADA doesn't name every kind of impairment. We'll do some of that in a minute here. But they're just saying if the impairment limits what you can do, limits your major life activities, then that's a disability and it needs to have accommodation. So this is a poll, and when we did this in the live class, everybody added to this by responding. You can either go to, on your computer, pollev.com/CindyJoper381, or you can use your phone and text that, and text in your words. So the question that I asked is, think about if you suddenly had an accident that disabled you, what would be the aspects of quality of life that you would miss the most if you lost some part of your facility, your ability to do things the way you always have? What would it be? And the group that was in the live class when they did this, the biggest answer was independence. And a lot of these other things have to do with independence. And I think it's something that all of us value, is our ability to do things for ourselves independently. And so think about having a disability, and suddenly, instead of being able to be independent, you have to rely on other people to do everything for you, and how that would impact your life. And so, for instance, say you want to read a website. Well, people who have a visual disability can read a website using a screen reader. But if the website's not written so that it's accessible to the screen reader, they can't do that, and they have to have somebody else read it to them. And I would find that to be very discouraging, to have to ask somebody for help with every little thing I want to do. So independence is sort of a key value that many of us share, and we want to be able to have everybody have independence when they're using the materials that we've developed. So this little video talks about who is disabled. I'm going to play this, and I think it gives you the idea of how we look at disabilities.
Imagine a town full of physically impaired people, all wheelchair users. They run everything. There aren't any able-bodied people, so naturally, when they built the town, the community decided it was pointless to have ceilings 10 foot high and doors 7 foot high. So the ceilings were built at 7 foot and the doors at 5 foot. In every way, they designed the place the way they wanted it. One day, a few able-bodied people come to stay. One of the first things they notice is the height of the doors. And the reason they notice is because they keep hitting their heads. They come to stand out by the bruises they carry on their foreheads. Soon, doctors, psychiatrists, and social workers all become involved. Committees are formed. Many people are worried about what becomes known as the problem of the able-bodied. Throughout the town, there is a growth of real concern. Specially toughened helmets are handed out, free to the able-bodied, to be worn at all times. Braces are designed which give support and relief, while keeping the able-bodied wearer bent to normal height. Various groups of compassionate wheelchair users get together and form registered charities. Every quarter they have a collection day. Upturned helmets are left in pubs and shops for people to drop their small change into. There is talk of founding special homes. But then one day, it dawns on the able-bodied that there's nothing actually wrong with them, just that society excludes them.
So I think you see by that video that the environment is often the disabling factor more than what's wrong with the people themselves. That if the environment is well designed, then disabilities are not an issue. So here's another video, and this one has to do with, this one has to do with medical model versus social model of disability. And I'll let it play, then I'll talk about that a little bit.
According to the medical model of disability, the word disabled means less able. Less able to achieve your potential, less able to have meaningful relationships, less able to play an active part in the world around you, and that this is just your bad luck. This outdated view of the world puts the responsibility of overcoming disabling barriers on the person with an impairment. But this idea is changing. The more modern social model of disability says that a person doesn't have a disability, that they are disabled. They are disabled by society. It is the attitudes and physical barriers imposed on them by society that prevents them from achieving their potential. The social model was developed by disabled people and their allies to help them take action against discrimination and to empower people to find solutions, remove barriers, and campaign together for equality and human rights. They showed how people with lots of different impairments face many of the same problems. These disabling barriers include prejudiced opinions and attitudes, restricted access, and people being systematically excluded. The social model looks for the ways that society can be planned and organised in order to provide accessibility, independence, and opportunity in a way that enables people rather than disables them. What we learn from the social model of disability is that disability is a social construct created by social barriers, barriers which can be eliminated. We learn that it is the responsibility of government, public spaces, businesses, and individual people to make the changes, to increase the access, and build a more equal society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
So there are categories of disabilities on lots of different ways, and some people have multiple disabilities, so it's not that there's just one. So one category would be visual disabilities like blindness, low vision, color blindness. There's auditory disabilities like deafness and deaf-blind, which is even more complicated because you've got two major disabilities together. Dexterity or motor disabilities, speech disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and reading disabilities, and then seizure disorders, which can also be a problem. So there are different ways of accommodating the various disabilities. For blindness, for people with blindness, screen readers are often used. Low vision, there's screen magnification and contrast settings. So sometimes they'll change, instead of having this white background with black writing on it, they might prefer black background with white writing or another color combination that works better for their eyes. For colorblind people, we want to make sure that we don't do things that with just color as the cue. And I have an example of that in a minute here. For people who are deaf, we want to make sure that any video and audio has closed captioning and transcripts so that they can read it if they can't hear it. Deaf-blind people often use screen readers with a special refreshable braille display So anything that's accessible to a screen reader will also be accessible for the deafblind with their refreshable braille display. Dexterity and motor disabilities are quite common especially as people get older, and with an increasingly aging society. There's estimates that of okay, let me back up here. In the general population, about 20% of people have a disability. Of those, about 8.5% have a disability that impacts their ability to use computers and the internet and the web. But when people get over 65, up to 40% of people have some sort of disability. And dexterity and motor disabilities are quite common. So we want to be sure that we accommodate that. For a short time, I lived in an apartment complex that was for people ages 55 plus, and I decided it was more like 75 plus. I felt very young and very spry there. But I noticed a lot of people, with arthritic hands had a hard time holding the mouse and doing things. Also, a lot of people in walkers and little scooters and things because of the motor disabilities. And so it's something that could happen to any of us at any time. We want to be aware of that. One of the most hidden ones would be cognitive, and I'll group that with reading disabilities. You can't tell that somebody has a reading disability, and they usually work very hard to keep it hidden. But we can accommodate that by using a reasonable reading level. At the ESD, we aim for 8th grade reading level on all of the materials that we put out. And that sounds like we're talking down to people. We're really not. If you can keep it at an 8th grade reading level, everyone can read it easily, clearly, and you have much better communication because people understand what you were trying to say. They don't have to fight through layers of words and reread, and because it's highly technical. It should be something that we want people to understand what we're saying. Let's keep the reading level simple. Use clean layouts and fonts that are easy on the eyes. Seizure disorders are sort of a separate category of their own. You may remember when people first started making their own websites, they just loved putting flashing lights and things on there. Well, in 1997, there was a Pokemon episode that aired only in Japan, but it had this intense sequence of bright flashing lights in different colors, very strobish, and 685 children were sent to the hospital with seizures. And it happened all over Japan. So it wasn't like there was this hysterical, I heard somebody had it and I had the same thing. This happened to that many different children in Japan watching Pokemon that day. That episode never aired outside of Japan because they weren't going to have that happen again. But it really brought up photosensitive seizure disorder, that having all that flashing can cause problems. So if you're doing anything that you just want to avoid flashing lights, besides it's tacky. So an activity, pick up a piece of paper in front of you and put it and close your eyes and read what that handout says out loud. Oh, that's right, you can't. That's because paper is not accessible to people. Paper is great for people with normal vision who can see it, but it doesn't work for everyone. But the good news is that items on the screen can be read for anyone. As long as it's written accessibly, they can use a screen reader that'll read it out loud to them. There they get their independence back and know what's being said. So be aware that that's why we want to do this. We want everybody to be able to get access to the information that we're sharing. So I'm going to demonstrate a person using a screen reader. And one of the things that you'll notice is that he has it set to read very quickly. And this is typical of people who use a screen reader. They use it often enough that they kind of tune their ears to hear what they want to hear, or pick it out at least in this very rapid reading, because otherwise you're spending a lot more time waiting for the screen reader to get the things. So if you can train yourself to listen quickly, then it can sort of skim through the page for you. So I'll play this and then talk about some of the features that he demonstrates.
Hi, my name is Jason Holt. I'm with the Universal Access Department. Today, we will be demonstrating a screen reader. With this screen reader, I, as a blind person, can navigate to a web page, and I don't use a mouse because I can't see where the mouse is pointing, but I can use a keyboard, and JAWS, the screen reader, will tell me where I am on the page and allow me to read various parts of the Okay, let's take a few minutes to actually see how JAWS works. Here we are at my main screen on my computer, and I want to browse the internet. So I will open up a browser. I'll press the Windows key, and JAWS announced that I have a menu. Then I want to find my browser. My favorite browser is Firefox. Oh, Firefox, that's the one I want. So I'll press enter. That opens the browser. Now I'll press Alt D to put my cursor in the navigation bar. Now let's go to our homepage, the community college's homepage. So I'll type SLCC EDU. You notice that JAWS repeats to me each character as I type it. That way, if I make a mistake, I can hear it and I can backspace. And I can retype it again. Now press enter. Oh, it says SLCC. It sounds like I'm on the right page. Okay, here we are on our homepage, and I want to go to the accessibility page, the college's accessibility page. I don't know where that is on this screen, so I'll do a search. I'm searching for accessibility. Oh, it tells me I'm now on the link that says accessibility. That's what I want. So I'll press enter on that link. Accessibility visit link. Vertical RSLCC-055 list. Page has 3 regions, 1 heading and 69 links. List of links with SLCC/accessibility. Okay, I'm on the accessibility page. If I press H, which lets me jump from header to header. Accessibility heading level 1. Heading, I'm sorry, not header. I'm at the accessibility heading. Let's read what it says under that. Oh, there's a list of items. Home, accessibility. Web accessibility. Purchasing. Accessible documents. Types of disability. Captioning. Now let's hear what the text says underneath the heading. Web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web. More specifically, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web and the data contributed to the web. One thing you should know is that having a screen reader by itself does not make the internet accessible to me. If you look at our homepage, and as I navigate through it, you'll find that there are headings and regions which the designers have made some effort to put into the page to allow me to jump from section to section. So I don't have to stop and explore every little link to find where I want to be. On some web pages where there might be almost 100 links, but yet there's no way to skip to the main part of this article that I want to read. So I have to skip from link to link to link and jump from section to section to find where I want to be, the main article. Sometimes it is frustrating. After one has some experience with a screen reader, you learn some tricks.
Okay, so you'll notice there that some features that were built in that helped him were like headings that helped him go to get sort of a scan view of the whole page, lists so that you know exactly where you are. And he talked about how the web designer can put these things in. A lot of those features are also used in documents. So let's take a look at the features that are common in documents. You want a title on your page, headings, links. You want to be careful to use a color. I'm going to go into each of these separately, so I'm just kind of zipping through this list. So color contrast, alt text, reading level, fonts, and tables. And I'll go into each of these separately. So, excuse me. Page title is different from the file name. The page title is usually put into properties of the page, and it describes the topic or purpose. It's a better name so that when you bring up a document and a screen reader reads the title, the person knows they're on the page they want to be on. It gives the user context about the page and what content it has, where a file name may or may not. And that'll apply to Word, PDF, websites, any kind of documents. Headings are how you would really outline your page. So if you think of an outline like you learned to do back in school, where you have the main idea is the number one, that would be your heading one. Usually there's only one H1 on a page, or heading 1. You want to go in order so you're not skipping numbers because you like the formatting better. Headings are usually formatted a certain way, and that helps you scan the page and understand what they do. But you can change the formatting of the heading. Don't change the numbers order. So you could go like H1, H2, H2, H3, H2. So in a heading that would indent as you go and then back out. You can also jump up a couple levels, like you have heading 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back up to a heading 2. If you think of an outline, that makes sense. But you can't go H1, then H3, then H5, and then H2 randomly around just because you like the formatting of those headings better. So stay in order, it's hierarchical, and that really makes a difference for people using screen readers. But if you think about a page that you're reading, you count on headings. You don't even probably realize it so much anymore. But you quickly scan a page when you see headings and you know which part you want to read. Because very few of us read every page we read from top to bottom sequentially. We jump around to find the information we're looking for. Now, links are really important, especially on websites, but also in documents. And a link should describe its purpose or destination. Often, for many years, you would see on a website, click here or here as the link text. Well, if you're reading a page with a screen reader and you're having it read the links out loud to you so you can find the link you want, and every link, instead of telling you what it's about, says click here, you would get frustrated very quickly. So you want the link to describe what it does. Now, if your document's also going to be printed, you would put in a friendly hyperlink like community college website, whatever that is, and hyperlink to that. But then you would also, in parentheses after it, spell out that link, but not hyperlink it, so that a person reading with a screen reader won't have to listen to that read out, but a person who's got it printed and is using it can type in the words. So color. It should not be the only means to convey information. Here's what I mean by that. So here's a bad example. So here's a table, and we're going to assume socially or culturally that we understand that green is yes and red is no, which may or may not be true. So right away, we're kind of breaking some rules here. And a person who is colorblind will not see that the same. I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. So what's better to do is to use words. You can still use color to help with your information. Color is not a no-no. It just shouldn't be the only thing. So just to show you, I've used a little program called Color Oracle and taken a look at this same page, and then I took a screenshot so you can see what it looks like. So here's what it looks like if you had the red-green color blindness. As you see, the red and the green look very, very similar. So that's why it is not accessible. I can maybe tell there's a difference, but I don't know which one is which. So you want to have other ways of understanding the information besides just color. Now, color contrast. One moment, please. My PowerPoint is cutting out. I'm going to have to stop it and start it up again. Does this occasionally? Not sure why. Color contrast. There are guidelines called the WCAG guidelines, WCAG, and they're the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, I believe is what the C stands for, sorry. But we want to follow what's called WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 is the newest standard. And those say that colors need to contrast at the ratio of 4.5 to 1. It's a very complex mathematical formula that I do not even pretend to understand. I just know you can look it up. So I'll show you how to look it up in just a moment. And if it's larger text, like 14 points or higher, then 3 to 1 will work. So if you look at this example on the page, this is a low contrast. It's only 1.47 to 1. And that text is very hard to read. It's small, the contrast is poor. In the second example, the text is a little larger and the contrast is 4.81 to 1. You'll see how much easier that is to read. It's just intuitively, you look at it and it's easier. So you want to make sure you have a contrast of at least 4.5 to 1. And there are ways of learning that. So I'm going to show you this contrast checker. One moment while I share a different screen. Okay, and so this is from WebAIM, and I will talk about WebAIM a little later, but it gives you an opportunity to try different colors and see how they work together. So let me put in another color randomly. Let's see. Okay, it's sort of an orangey color. And let me just do here. Okay, so this sort of peachy color with white fails at all the different levels. If I darken it, 3.7 to 1, it'll pass for large text, but not pass for smaller text. If I go a little darker, now I'm at 5.84, and it passes. So, and this is a new feature on here. It says graphical objects and user interface components. So if you had text input in there, that would work. So this color contrast checker, I use it all the time. I don't put colors together on a website unless I've checked it through here. This is a really good one. It allows you to compare any two colors. It doesn't matter whether you put the color in the foreground or the background. You just need both colors in there because the contrast is the same no matter which direction you do them. So it doesn't really matter which one's your foreground and which one's your background. Now let's say I want to see if this will work with black. That happens to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And now it fails again because there's not enough contrast. And then I might need to go to the lighter color and then I can get enough contrast. So it's something you can play with and it will help you with that. Okay, let me switch back to my PowerPoint. And this other one is called the Tanaguru Contrast Finder. I also find this one really useful because it'll help suggest colors for you. So let's say that you have your foreground color and a background color, and you check them to see if they work together. So there's just check and find. And it'll show you that the ratio right now is 3.61. Well, that's not 4.5, so that doesn't work. But they say, but if you like those colors in combination, here are some similar colors that have a ratio of at least 4.5. So it gives you an opportunity to find the color numbers that you want. So here you'll see the colors numbers are written right here. And you can just copy those and put them into your website or your document. And, you know, to the untrained eye, those colors all look pretty similar, but there's enough difference there that you can choose one that works the best for you. So you can use that with any two colors as well. Okay. Now, alt text, every image, and actually a lot of other things on pages, like other features besides just images, but let's talk about images, need alt text. And alt text is alternative text. And for those of us who are sighted, alternative text shows if the picture doesn't load on a page, you know how sometimes websites don't load completely, or you get a broken picture image, and there'll be alt text that tells you what the picture is. Also, if you hover over an image, it should give you its alt text. It should tell the person the same information as the image. It's kind of, why did you put this image in the page? So you're describing the context, within the context of the page, what the meaning of this image is. You're not just doing like, this is a picture of a mountain and trees and a lake. Well, okay, that's a description of the picture, but it doesn't tell you why it's there. So it could be, this is a place that people go to enjoy nature. It would be more of a description that would be a good alt text that would help the person who's seeing this without their eyes understand what's happening. If the alt text is only decorative, you put in what's called null alt text, which is a double quotes with nothing between it. That will tell the screen reader to just ignore it, that it's decorative only. When you put an image in, the image itself should not have text in it. If you have to have text in your image, make sure that you put that text in the alt text. But you're better off having an image and just using plain text because the screen reader can read plain text. Captioning is optional but can be helpful. Tables have to have header rows. That's how they're organized. A screen reader will read the header rows. You can have column headers, you can have row headers going down the side. You can have both or either, but you need some way that this table is organized in their headers. And when we go into each of the different types of documents on the subsequent classes, we'll talk about how to put in header rows. You should use as simple a table as possible. Try not to have all these different merged cells and different directions that it's going. Just a straight across table works the best. Tables need to be used for presenting data and not page layout. And data can mean words as well as information, as well as numbers. It just has to be something that's logically arranged in a table. Back when I was first learning to do websites and we tried to do page layout to put things on a page where we wanted and we couldn't, we often used a table that was invisible so that we could place things on the page. That's no longer an acceptable practice, but because it is not accessible for a screen reader. So really only use tables for tabular information. And again, captions aren't required, but they can be very helpful to explain the table. Reading level on all the pages, as I explained before, we at ESD 113 aim for an 8th grade reading level. And even if you are an experienced writer who's very good, you need a way to check your reading level. The tool that we use most of the time in our communications department is Hemingway app. And this is the link to it, hemingwayapp.com. And I've also linked to that in the Canvas class. So that it's in the resources page, so you'll be able to link to it. So I want to demonstrate it really quickly. If you go to the Hemingway app, you'll see that all you have to do is delete this and paste in whatever text you have that you want to check. And then it will give you this information. Ironically, it's all color-coded, but I think you can figure out by hovering over it, it gives you more information on some of these. So yellow means that the sentence is lengthy and complex. And so if it's yellow, you should probably shorten it or split it. If it's red, it's so dense and complicated, your readers will get lost trying to follow its meandering, splitting logic. Try editing it to remove the red. So you may have to just totally rewrite those red sentences. I often end up breaking them out into bullet points. If it's so complex that it has lots of parts to it, rather than having a very complex sentence, I'll break it out into bullet points. Bullets are very readable. People can scan them quickly, and it helps with readability. Sometimes it'll have fancy words like utilize. And if you have one that has this purple, it'll give you suggestions for how you can replace it with something else. So you can say you can use a shorter word instead of utilize. Says the same thing, is easier to read. May not make you sound too fancy, but that's okay. You want to sound clear. Adverbs, we tend to overuse adverbs. They aren't as strong as things written without the adverbs. So instead of saying adverbs and weakening phrases are helpfully shown in blue, you just say adverbs and weakening phrases are shown in blue. The helpfully doesn't really do anything. Get rid of them or pick words with force, perhaps. You don't need that. Just say, get rid of them. Pick words with force. Now, this one is my personal thing I do wrong the most often. This is where Hemingway app is always correcting me, is passive voice. And I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. So it will tell you how many times you have passive voice and what your goal is for a document this size. So it says you can get by with 2. So, but if you can get rid of them, if you can rewrite it in a way that does that, do that. So this is Hemingway app, very useful tool. Kristen, who's our communications director, who writes professionally, uses it all the time. So she doesn't feel like she's above that just because she's a good writer. You use this to help your writing. And again, it's in the resources page of the Canvas class. Fonts, and I'm sorry, my PowerPoint's having a weird problem again. Let me get out of that and back into it. So with fonts, you want your fonts to be clear and readable, something that's pleasing to look at. Sans serif fonts are preferred. Those are the ones that don't have the little curly cues on everything. Some examples of that would be Arial or Verdana. Calibri is another one. But you want a pretty plain, easy to read font. 12-point or larger. Don't make people strain their eyes. Don't use colored text and specialty fonts. I was watching TV when one of the president's former attorneys was on his way out, and a lot of the reporters that were talking about getting emails from him. And one of the things they commented on, this was John Dowd, that all of his emails were in purple Comic Sans 14-point font, which is probably the least professional looking font I could think of. Did not, present like, hey, I'm a high-powered attorney when you use purple Comic Sans size 14. So don't do that. Use a reasonable font that people will look at and not think, oh, what a stupid font. Now, one of the most famous people with disability would be Stephen Hawking, or what it was Stephen Hawking. And as we know, Stephen Hawking was a brilliant mind, but for many years, his physical disabilities locked him in to where if he hadn't had special assistive technologies, we would not have known about this brilliant mind. And he worked with Intel. In fact, the project lasted about 2 years of developing some of the different assistive technologies that he used. So I'm going to play a little video of Stephen Hawking and how they developed this and talk about that just a little bit.
Well, it is time now for our latest Bloomberg West series, Bioengineering the Senses, a closer look at the technology on the frontiers of medical science. Today, we're looking at the machine behind physicist Stephen Hawking and how smartphone technology is helping him communicate.
Medicine has not been able to cure me, so I rely on technology to help me communicate and live.
That vital system that Professor Stephen Hawking relies on has recently got an upgrade. Tasks that used to take 3 to 4 minutes, like opening a Word document, now take around 10 seconds. Intel has been working with Hawking for decades, and the latest upgrade was over 2 years in the making.
So we completely changed the way that he's interfacing with these aspects of the system to have him not rely on the mouse. So based on whatever he happens to be doing, we would surface the most logical things that he might want to do.
That also applies to Hawking's text-to-speech system. UK startup SwiftKey, whose software runs predictive text apps on smartphones, has doubled Hawking's speech rate. It considers what Hawking was last writing, whether there were any errors, and then tries to predict which character he might choose next. To do that, the SwiftKey program has to learn how Hawking writes and speaks by analyzing dozens of his documents, some published, others not.
The tests we ran showed that of a given body of text made up of a certain number of characters, Professor Hawking would actually only have to enter around 15 to 20% of those characters, and the rest would be inferred.
Now here's the crazy part. Everything Stephen Hawking does on his computer is triggered by one muscle in his cheek. An infrared sensor detects when his cheek muscle moves up, just the way our smartphones can sense when it's close to the face. Future versions of this technology are aiming to take a bigger range of movement into account.
But he can actually today say yes and no by moving, his eyebrows and by pulling his mouth. So one of the things that we've been working on is using essentially a camera system to detect these different movements. So now he can, for example, undo things by saying no, rather than having to go and manipulate the whole screen to get to a backspace button, for example.
Intel is even trying to develop brain control interfaces, which could help people who can no longer move any muscles at all. That won't necessarily happen to Stephen Hawking, but with the market forecast to reach $55 billion in 2016, it represents the next leap for assistive technologies. Well, it is time now.
So, as you see, those technologies were developed for Stephen Hawking, but he made sure that they're all open source and can be used for others. So, the work that was done for him, because he is Stephen Hawking, is actually being applied for many other people. And I know that when I'm typing a text on my phone, I often use the predictive words because it makes it so much faster to type. Um, and so you don't have to use all those little shortcut things. You can actually use real words that people can read because it does the predictive. So it can be useful for anyone. I want to talk a little bit about universal design. And universal design is actually one of those concepts in the physical world that is for accessibility for everyone, but it's something we can keep in mind when we're doing design on electronic media as well. So the principles of universal design, I'm not going to go into this very deeply, but that we want to make sure that things that we develop are equitable, flexible, simple and intuitive to use, that they're easy to perceive, there's a tolerance for effort, low physical effort required, and the size and space for approaching use. So let's talk a little bit about some things here. Now, OXO is a brand of kitchen products, and the peeler here is something that was the first OXO product, and the developer of that, his wife had developed arthritis and was having a hard time using the peeler, and so he was trying to figure out how to make a better one. So I'll skip the video and just talk about this one. So they've developed a whole range of easy to use kitchen products. Let's see, in my house, I have this one, I have this one, I have this one, and they're all well designed, but they make life easier for everyone. So they were developed for people with disabilities, but they help all of us. And I think that that's kind of the lesson to learn here, is that the work we do for people with disabilities is not just doing extra. It's making things better for everyone who uses it. And if we keep that in mind, that helps with our attitude and it helps with what we're developing, because we know that we're making a product that everyone can use better. Now, to think about, once again, my PowerPoint is freaking out on me. So some things that were made. So curb cutouts were designed for wheelchair users, but it's also useful for other things. So think about for a second, who else uses those curb cutouts? Well, if I'm pushing the baby in the stroller, very handy to have that curb cutout. If I'm on a skateboard, well, no, not me, but somebody else, on a bike, I have a hard time sometimes, if my knee is acting up, stepping off a curb. And so this way I don't have to step off a curb, I can just go down a slow ramp. So even though I don't technically have disabilities necessarily, there's a whole range of disabilities. And, not being as flexible and mobile as a younger person, I find that this is a helpful thing, and it helps a lot of different people. Lever style doors. When you're walking in the door and you've got your arm full of groceries and you can press down with your elbow and open the door, very handy. I use that one at my apartment all the time. It can have some drawbacks. There's a 2-year-old granddaughter who finds it very easy to use this style of door. Other people mentioned cats and dogs can learn to press these down. So it is handy for everyone to be easier to get in and out of the door. It can also have some drawbacks. The automatic door opener. One day I was walking into the ESD and there were a couple of people in front of me walking in. One had a cart full of food that was delivering some catering. One had an armful of boxes. I think they were teaching a class. And then I was the third person in line. And so the first person pressed the door, pushed the cart through, no problem. Nobody had to hold the door for them. They could independently go through. The person with all the boxes was able to walk through without having to get help opening the door, jumble things around, drop the boxes. And I just walked through because the door was open and it was easier that way. So it's handy for everyone. On the restroom in our building, we have an opener like this. So if you're coming out of the restroom after you've washed your hands, you don't want to touch the door that everybody else has touched, you can use your elbow to bump this door opener and walk through the door. So besides being helpful for people who have wheelchairs trying to get in the door. So it's anything that's been developed to accommodate people with disabilities almost always can make things easier for other people as well. So some of the questions that people pose to me, and I want you to think about these, and then I'll give you the answers I usually use. So people will say, but I know that nobody in my fill in the blank here, group, department, club, place of work, whatever, has a disability. Why would I have to make these documents accessible? Well, got an answer for that? Good. Well, the answer is, first of all, how do you know those are the only people that are ever going to see it? Are you telling me you're going to discriminate against people when you're hiring because if they can't read your document, you don't want them there? And what's wrong with making it accessible for everybody? That way, if somebody new comes in, if the group membership changes, you've already got the documents ready to go. The last thing is, how do you know nobody has a disability? People do hide them. Kristen, who I work with, knows someone who's almost totally deaf, and he doesn't tell people that. So when he's at work, he often wears headphones, and so people think he's listening to music. He's very good at lip reading. So they tap his shoulder to get his attention. He turns and looks at them, and he can lip read, and he actually fakes it. They don't know that he has this. My daughter's fiance is legally blind. He's albino, and so he has very low vision, but he can see, just low vision. But he doesn't let people know how low his vision is. He tries to get by. So if you just first meet him, you don't necessarily know that he needs accommodations for reading. And so the thing is, people don't advertise their disabilities to you. So don't assume that they don't have them just because you can't see them. Especially those cognitive and reading disabilities, those are often hidden. Another question I get, I have these documents hidden behind a login. Do I still need to make them accessible? Short answer, yes. And again, all those arguments from the last question apply. So you do need to make everything that you do accessible. It's not as hard as it sounds. We're going to go over some basic principles that apply to almost every kind of document. We'll cover them in each class till at the end you realize you just need to do these things and you're going to be okay. The ESD definitely has some values that we're working on. Equity and inclusion are very, very important to us at ESD 113, and we hope to everybody else. We want everyone to be included and have access in what we do. And equity is not just racial equity, like a lot of people may think. It's equity that everybody who's one of our clients, which can be just anyone, is able to access everything that we do. So that's why we do this. We're kind of noble about it, but we really do believe that. Yes, there are legal reasons to do it. And that's kind of where we started, was trying to meet legal requirements. The more we worked on it, the more we realized we did it because it's the right thing to do, and we want everyone included. So that's why we're doing this. And let me talk quickly about the Canvas class that goes along with this class. So let me get in there. Sorry for all of the open places I have here. So you will have gotten a link to this Canvas class. And I've already logged in. When you get in, this is the homepage that you'll see. And right now, just Module 1 is up and ready for you to use. So you can click on that and it'll take you there. And I'm going to view this as a student in a moment to show you what you would be seeing. Okay, so this is the page as it will look when you log in. You can go to Intro to Accessibility. For this first class, there are just 3 things to do, and then that resources page I talked about. So the fixed reading level will give you some text. You'll copy this text, paste it into Hemingway app, and there's a link here, and rewrite it so that the reading level is between 6th and 9th grade. Once you've done that, copy what you came up with, and go to the next button and paste in your response, and submit that assignment. Hopefully you can, let me see. Oops, that's next. I may have to take a look at that and make sure that you can paste in your response. Sorry about that if you can't. Now, the second thing is the discussion. There's a question. want you to respond to, and then come back again and respond to another post from at least one other person. And then the last thing is there's a short quiz for you to take. It's easy. Everything you need to know was included. But if you want to look at anything in the PowerPoint, I put the PowerPoint up on there. So let me go back now to the modules, the accessibility resources. And there's our PowerPoint from today. Those contrast checkers that I told you about, the Hemingway app, there's another readability checker, and some informational websites. I found the University of Washington, okay, it's my alma mater, but still, it has wonderful resources for developing accessible documents. So if you want resources you can look for, look there. The University of Minnesota also has a great site for that. I'm thinking that a lot of universities do. It's a focus of a lot of theirs. And then I mentioned WebAIM. They're a real leader in accessibility. They're based at Utah State University. And actually, I went there for a 2-day training last spring. And they developed that color contrast checker. They do a lot of work on disabilities. So they're another resource I highly recommend. So you'll log in here, do those 3 activities. I will check on that fixed reading level activity. Hopefully it'll be fixed by the time you look at it. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or contact me in any other way. And I'll see you at the class next week.